Speaker. I rise on behalf of the Greens to address the Stronger Communities Legislation Amendment Miscellaneous Bill 2020, a bill which makes a number of technical but important changes, and the Greens offer our support of this bill, but wish to flag that my colleague in the other place, David Shoebridge, will be looking to move amendments in relation to 1.61 and 6, so that those provisions around alternatives to prisons would actually be offered to as many offenders as possible, so that they have access to alternatives to the prison system. I also note that he will address in more detail the areas of this piece of legislation in relation to provisions around tendency and coincidence, which previous members have also outlined. But I wanted to address rather than all of the aspects of this bill before us, particularly the reference to the proposed amendments to the definition of prescribed sexual offence in the Criminal Procedures Act 1986 to include sections 91P, 91Q, 91R of the Crimes Act 1900, to the section 91S of the Crimes Act 1900 to include a reference to the section 91R, allowing a court to order that a person found guilty of an offence under section 91R must remove, retract, recover, delete or destroy an intimate image. We, the Greens, are strongly supportive of increased protections for victims of so-called revenge porn and situations where threats have been made to use intimate images of a person. One of the most significant improvements in this bill in relation to this is that it covers situations where someone threatens to use images. Currently, this is not an offence, and there can be no proceedings or takedown orders in relation to threats around this. And this bill fixes that, and it is a very welcome fix that I know will have a huge impact on so many people's lives. The law has lagged significantly behind community attitudes in recognising the seriousness of these offences and the need to protect people who have been victimised and are victimised by others through these types of threats and these types of appalling behaviours. We have heard way too many stories, and they've been covered in the media way too often, when it comes to people, particularly young women, seeking to raise the unauthorised and malicious distribution of personal images with police and not receiving an appropriate response. In some cases, the way that these matters have been handled by police is also lacking in the sensitivity and the training that is required, and in many cases it is hoped that these changes will not only send a message to the society and our community about the changes that are needed to be made and the respect that needs to be shown to women in our community when it comes to these types of threats and these types of offences, but also send a clear message to all elements of the justice system, including those on the front line, about just how serious these offences are. Being able to take the image which was shared and threatened to be shared out of circulation and the possession of the offender is an important measure to protect the victim, and one that we absolutely support and is absolutely needed. There is a clear need also, beyond the scope of the current bill, to require service providers to promptly and permanently remove such images from their platforms and subsequent transmissions. It's not just enough to be looking at the offender in relation to these matters, but actually looking at the service providers and others that are actually putting these images into other platforms, and subsequent transmission also needs to be addressed and looked at. There should also be alternatives to police and the criminal justice system when it comes to victims who are unwilling or unable to go through these quite traumatising systems. And these could be properly funded and independently done through a privacy commissioner or another statutory authority that would allow women, particularly women that are impacted, the option to be able to take an alternative to the police and justice system, which we know can be re-traumatising for so many, but actually find a way where justice is achieved and those images and those actions are actually taken care of outside of that system as well. It is important for us to recognise that while these are issues that can impact all people and risk all people in the community, that particularly women are bear the brunt of these kinds of threats and attacks, and we are sick We are sick to death of the damage and the threats of harm that this system and the systems that support it impact on our ability to participate in society, on the intimidation and the harassment and the fear that is waged on us when we seek to engage in public debate, in interaction with our friends, with our communities and our families. And it's important for us to recognise that while these are done by individuals in individual acts of harassment or intimidation or aggression, that actually these acts are against women on an individual level, but it is the systems, it is the failures in our systems, of the justice system, of the laws, of all of the government policies and processes that have not prevented this from happening, that mean that it is also a systemic failure. Violence and harassment and intimidation of women demonstrates that there is something very sick and very wrong with our society, and that is a failing of everyone in this place, of the laws that have been put in place to create and entrench forms of patriarchy and entrench forms of inequality in our society, and lack of respect for women when it comes to these issues. So it is absolutely welcome that we are seeing these changes. It is absolutely essential that we see these changes put in place, but we need to recognise that while this is still a threat, while this is still a problem, and while there are still women out there who are facing these real and present dangers every day, but are feeling uncomfortable and unsafe to report those through the formal channels, through the police or through other mechanisms of the justice system, because they do not have faith in that process, because it is part of the patriarchal structure that has oppressed women for so long and is part of the problem when it comes to violence against women, that we need to recognise that other avenues are also available. We should be telling women to be angry about this. We should continue to call this out, because the threats to people to be able to participate in their communities and their society, while we still see patriarchal systems in place there to oppress women, need to be called out, and I will continue to call that out in this place. Thank you.